To the anthropology department of the George Washington University. I'm once again Alex Dent. I'll talk a bit more about myself in a second, but I want to give you a brief introduction to the programs, the graduate programs in anthropology, which I'm really excited about. I'll be talking a lot about the MA program today, but I'll also do some material on the PhD program, and I'm happy to answer lots of questions about the PhD program in the chat. So just a quick introduction to myself, since I'm the one doing the talking. I'm a linguistic anthropologist. I've done a lot of my research in Brazil, mostly on music and intellectual property. I've also done a bunch of work on policing and digital technology. I have a current project right now that I'll talk about at the end that looks at teenage cell phone use. It turns out teenagers use cell phones a lot. We're studying that in Washington, D.C. public schools funded through the NSF. Which is a fun project. I'm also a musician and a dog owner. Those won't really come up today. Those aren't really relevant, but those are, features about me, the person who is talking right now. So let me talk a little bit about anthropology. This is going to be a review for some of you, but this will also give you a sense of how we approach it specifically at GW. By and large, anthropology is the study of human difference and also the study of human origins. The basic concepts, without disappearing down a rabbit hole too much here, we're concerned with culture, this set of learned rules for living. We spend a lot of time on language. I myself am a linguistic anthropologist. We do field work, which means we go and we hang out for a long period of time. It allows us to see how the different layers of culture and society overlap on one another. Other disciplines don't really do that lingering the way we do in anthropology. We are interested in comparison, cross-cultural comparison often. We're interested in eliciting voices from varied perspectives. Plurality is really important to anthropology from a disciplinary perspective. We do a lot of qualitative methods, but some quantitative stuff as well. Statistics often important to the work that anthropologists do, but very clearly qualitative methods from interviews and participant observation and the like. So that's a quick whirlwind, probably familiar to many of you, but that's really our approach here. One of the unique things about our department, there's a dwindling number of four fields departments in the United States. It's it's often hard for the different subsections to get along with one another, but we do in this department. We get along really well. So there's four subfields: sociocultural anthropology, which is really, the study of present day humans; linguistic anthropology, which is closely affiliated with that, present day contemporary natural language context, study of language and culture and society. And then there's biological anthropology, which is really the study of biological variation and also human origins. We spend a lot of time on that in this department. And then archaeology sort of bridges often. There's some more present tense material or closer to present tense, and then there's some very distant human record. But it's really about humanity's material past and archaeology kind of bridging between those disciplines. We have in this department essentially a sociocultural linguistics kind of archaeology wing, and then a sort of a biological anthropology wing as well, called the Center for Advanced Study of Human Paleobiology. We get along really well in this department, and we believe in the four fields degree. It's one of the very few, it's the only degree where you can combine perspectives from the humanities, the social sciences, and the harder sciences. It's the only place you really get that in one kind of under one tent. So we're proud of our four fields emphasis. It's important to us. Why study anthropology at GW specifically? Well, first of all, the four fields, iconically represented there. But let me say a few things broadly about why anthropology is useful. One of the reasons I love doing anthropology is because we go and do field work, because we're immersed, it's long-term and immersive, we come to discover the unexpected connections between things. And I'll just give you a really brief example. When I was doing my first project on Brazilian country music, yes, it exists. I was finished research for the day. I'd been taking 10-string guitar lessons. I don't play it well. I was finished my fieldwork for the day. I was sitting having dinner with my family in Brazil, and they all of a sudden at the dinner table started talking about what times of day country music was broadcast on country music radio. And then they kind of related it to this whole typology of labor. Well, why is country music played in the morning? Well, because it's workers who are getting up early to go to work. And suddenly there I am discovering this overlap between sort of labor, time of day, social class, food is playing a role. That's the kind of thing you're not going to get from other disciplines. You're not going to get that trust. you're not going to get that depth. You're not going to get that unexpected connections. And that really connects to the next point, which is that anthropology is about depth. I think we're trained in a sort of a science fair kind of way to think about talking to more people, getting more people in your quote unquote sample is better. There's a place for that for sure. But anthropology isn't about talking to all the people. Anthropology is about talking to the right people. How do you find that out? Well, you go do deep, immersive, long-term research. We are interested in depth, not breadth. Another example, a lot of my Brazilian interlocutors are really embarrassed about country music. They didn't want to talk about it. And when I first met them, they would say things like, I never listened to this. It's terrible. It's garbage. And after I got to know them for a while, this was the days of the iPod, I would see, country music on their iPods. And I would say, you said you didn't listen to this. The trust was then there for me to go deeper into that kind of knowledge. And we could talk about, yeah, I was kind of embarrassed, but I actually do listen to it. Let's talk. Anthropology is useful in many different kinds of disciplines. I'll talk about those careers in the past, but one of the really emerging places that anthropologists are being used is in the tech sector. Anthropologists are being used for all kinds of technology work, and that is actually intensifying with artificial intelligence. Here are a couple of famous people. Here's Hugh Laurie and Kerry Washington. So other famous people, Zora Neale Hurston, trained by Franz Boas at Columbia, one of the great American minds and writers, Hurston. And then there's Yo-Yo Ma, who's a famous cellist. So, there's other, King Charles was actually an anthropologist as well. So there's a bunch of famous folks that have studied anthropology. But one of the last things I'll say about the discipline, broadly speaking, is because anthropology combines interviews and maybe some questionnaires with observations, you get the chance to kind of triangulate your data. Often, people will tell you they're doing one thing and then they'll do something slightly different, or maybe completely oppositional. And it's the observation that gives you that kind of background. So it allows you to translate what people are doing, not just by what they tell you, but by what you observe. I don't want to diss other disciplines, but a lot of disciplines are using experimental methodologies, which certainly have their place, or they're using questionnaires. They also have their place. But it's often data that's gathered, certainly with the questionnaires and with surveying. Polling is a great example of that right now. We're all kind of trying to figure out why polling is broken in this country. Other disciplines don't necessarily gather this sort of depth of information, the breadth of information over time, which is one reason we've, as I say, become so useful in the tech sector. Some jobs that anthropologists fulfill this list. Some of these are, more obvious than others, but, anthropology professor, okay, obvious. Archaeologist, also obvious, although archaeologists do plenty of work for the state. There's a lot of contract archaeologists. Forensic science is an offshoot. Archivist is a fairly obvious one. Museum curator as well, pretty obvious. Less obvious, plenty of anthropologists go into social work. Less obvious again, lots of anthropologists go into journalism. One of my good friends from graduate school wrote for the New York Times for a long time and is now doing this really interesting project on the outlaw oceans and the way oceans are this kind of unpoliced terrain. His background in anthropology is crucial to that work in journalism. A lot of anthropologists in development work, really useful there for helping. Sometimes development work can be a little overly centered on a particular way of doing things, and anthropologists can come in and kind of translate and say, well, actually the local scheme here, that doesn't work that way. We have to do it this way. So a lot of work in development. User research. This is not a commonly associated one with anthropology, but anthropologists are doing lots of user and design-based research, lots of market research. Lots of anthropologists, able to run focus groups, do interviews, do observations. We know that stuff. User-centered strategy and design. Similarly, in the digital world, we're being called on increasingly for that kind of work. My wife and I met in graduate school. I was getting a PhD in anthropology. She was getting a master's degree in anthropology. She now runs a web design company and is a strategist and uses that anthropology every day to study the organizations that she works with. Librarian is another fairly obvious one. And we've had anthropologists going to a number of different organizations, the Red Cross, various Smithsonian's, Committee for Refugee and Immigrants, DC Office of Chief Medical Examiner, National Park Service, Teach for America, National Institute of Health, and many other places now. A brief kind of departmental overview. So we have about 110 undergrads, about 80 graduate students. That's between hominid paleobiology, which is the bioanth, which is a separate program in some ways at the graduate level. And although we do have those courses in the basic MA, and then about 80 graduate students, 20 core faculty by and large, sometimes people on leave coming and going a little bit, but basically 21 core faculty and 3 full-time staff. In the GW context, we're kind of a largish medium department. The really large department's, of course, political science and history with like 40 people, but we're not a small department. Let me talk a little bit more about our master's programs. So we offer, there's sort of 4 options here. You can either just do a general anthropology MA, or you can do one of our concentrations. So we have a concentration in international development, and this just sort of shapes your course selection a little bit. We have a lot of folks do museum training, anthropology-based museum training. We have special skills and special training in that. And then we have a concentration in health, science, and society, which really kind of mingles technology, study of things like artificial intelligence, with thinking about medical anthropological issues. I know plenty of folks are interested in medical issues, health equity, and so on. So we cover that. We cover that material in our program. 2-year program, about 36 credits, more or less 12 courses. There's some different ways to slice that, but that's the upshot. Because we're a 4 fields department, we don't make folks do all 4 pro seminars. That's a bit onerous. It's a lot. Folks do 3, and you can apply to petition out of 1 if you want to. If you have a substantial background, say in linguistic anthropology, we're not going to make you do the linguistic anthropology pro seminar again. But we ask folks to do 3. So, at least one from the linguistics and cultural side, and at least 1 from archaeology and biological anthropology. They're great classes. They're foundational classes structured to introduce folks to the discipline, but at a sort of a considerably higher level than at an undergraduate level. You're really getting advanced theory in those pro seminars. We love teaching those courses. Everyone in our MA program does a culminating project. Some folks go away for the summer between their 1st and 2nd years, do some research, which they then turn into a project. So that's a thesis project. Others repurpose a course paper and turn it into a journal article submission. Either way, you get the opportunity to focus your interests. You get the opportunity to apply for some external funding, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And you get the opportunity to leave the program with an artifact, with a sort of a text artifact. Here's my paper. Those can be really useful when you're applying for jobs in the future to circulate those documents. But everyone does some kind of culminating project. One of the reasons I think we're a good master's program, and I've worked in a couple of master's programs. I worked at University of Chicago and University of Oklahoma before coming to GW. We offer really close mentoring in our department. You get close faculty contact. We encourage master's students to come by our office hours. You get close advising. We have a considerable flexibility in our program. You have the ability to go outside the George Washington University and take courses at Georgetown, take some courses from American University, Catholic University, University of Maryland. There's a consortium there. And so we've got considerable flexibility with some real strength institutionally in anthropology surrounding us. DC, as you might expect, or you might know, some of you may be here in DC right now, is a very rich place for internships. There's a lot of ways to put your practical skills to use and sort of practice what you're doing in the class. Folks do internships here a lot, and we provide an infrastructure for that. We can help you find the internships, and then you can get credit for those as well. And some folks turn those into independent research projects too. They're internship research. Another crucial thing about this department, and this is unique in North American departments, we have a very, very close relationship with the Smithsonian Institution. A bunch of their faculty come over and teach courses here in issues like materiality, aspects of evolution, aspects of museum curation and preservation, language, a lot of different issues. So the Smithsonian curators all of them PhDs in anthropology, come over and teach in our department a lot. We do work over there on that cell phone project that I talked about. I'm collaborating with Joshua Bell, who's I laugh about the job title. He's the curator of globalization at the Smithsonian, which is kind of like being the curator of everything. So we collaborate on the cell phone project with Joel Kuipers in our department. But Josh is, I just got off a meeting with him. We're turning the cell phone project into a graphic novel right now. And so we were meeting about that. But students go and work for Josh all the time, and for other faculty in the Smithsonian, sometimes after graduating, sometimes during. But that tight overlap with the Smithsonian is really a unique feature of our department, and it's an exciting feature of our department. And then there's a bunch of active faculty projects which students can participate in, and I'll enumerate some of those a little bit more towards the end of the presentation. Funding your MA, we recognize that this is an expensive proposition, and there are obviously complications associated with funding. We take those seriously. We have some teaching and research fellowships in the university. So PhD students need to teach for part of your funding package. So if you're interested in the PhD program, they're 5-year packages. You're teaching for, fully teaching for 4 of those years. I can talk about that more in the chat if you want me to. But for MA students, we do our best. It's not guaranteed, but we do our best, and we have a very good track record of providing at least 1 semester of teaching work in the 2 years. Some students definitely get more, but if you ask, we really do our best to place you in a teaching gig for a semester, at least a semester. Those are generally in our introductory courses in Anth 1002, which is sociocultural, and Anth 1004, which is linguistic, also archaeology. So master students get an opportunity to do some teaching for us. There are also some research assistant positions open. I'll talk a bit more about the Slave Rex project in a second. Other opportunities, we have a Richardson Fund, which I haven't mentioned here, which supplies some small grants. Kotlow Summer Research Fund, you can apply to go and do some research or do some research locally here in DC as well, but it's generally summer funding for a research project, so that's available as well. GW gives some packages out based on their kind of metrics of academic merit. I'm not familiar with all the equations they use there, but a number of our students do get offers through GW's Columbian College. There are plenty of work opportunities here at the university. A lot of our students end up doing some work here. And then of course, there's tons of work in DC. It's an active economy, it's doing very well. There's work in all kinds of sectors. Often those internships, by the way, turn into some kind of paid work after the fact. It's fairly frequent occurrence. So these are some of the ways to think about supplementing funding. Here are some interesting added features of our department. Also really unique at George Washington University is that we have the 4th most cited sociocultural anthropology journal in the world. It is Anthropological Quarterly. It was founded in 1921, originally a Catholic university. We bought it in the early 90s. The editor is Richard Grinker, Dr. Grinker, who works on autism and language in our department. The journal publishes articles, reviews, and all kinds of information on sociocultural anthropology. Students do, from time to time, do editorial work for Anthropological Quarterly. So that's an exciting sort of presence here in the department. Another exciting project that's underway is the Slave Rex project. It's supervised by Dr. Steve Lubkman. And one of the neat things about the Slave Rex project is it is working to build capacity for self-practiced archaeology. So what the project is working to do around the Black Atlantic, which is to say East Coast of the United States, Northwest coast of South America, East Coast of Africa, is really working to build knowledge for how to do archaeology among local communities. So how can we train folks to do their own archaeology, their own underwater archaeology, diving and so on, in order to claim aspects of their own heritage? So it's about building capacity, and it's been a very successful endeavor and trained a lot of folks and actually led to some documentaries. There's a documentary on Netflix, for instance, that revolves around a bunch of Slave Rex project work. It's funded through the National Museum of African American History. So that's a project that's ongoing and that has labor needs. The Cellular Connections Project is my project with Josh Bell and Joel Kuipers, looking at teenage cell phone use in Washington, D.C. high schools. We're a little bit of a funding valley right now. I'm applying for some new funding right now, but we're doing a bunch of research on cell phones and how kids handle it when things go wrong on the cell phone. You send that text to the wrong person or your cell phone smashes. We're doing a lot of that stuff. So that's in progress. And then the Rituals in the Making progress, directed by Dr. Sarah Wagner. This project looks at death and mourning and issues of memory in times of COVID. If you've ever seen these kind of white flag memorials, this is one of the things that Rituals in the Making has done. There you see a picture on the Capitol. That one made a bunch of the major news outlets. But this is another ongoing project which has continuing student labor needs. And so master's students will sometimes work in this project as well. But it gives you a sense of our department, sort of what we're up to. We're have these ongoing projects and interests. There are others, but let me stick with those. Here are, rather than sort of talk about all of our faculty, here are our three most recent hires. Dr. Diana Pardo Pedraza does amazing work on landmine mitigation in Colombia that also involves sort of interspecies ethnography. They're using dogs for the work, so her work kind of crosses disciplines there. Dr. Lanika Welcome does work in Trinidad on race and media and mediation, thinking about sort of how race is portrayed in contexts of violence. Dr. Oluseyi Agbalusi is an archaeologist of the Black Atlantic. His archaeological investigations are in West Africa, but he is also at the core of our current collaboration with the Mount Vernon estate, Washington's estate, where they are starting to do archaeology of some of the slave quarters, and Dr. Agbalusi is involved with those efforts as well. We have a field school out there attempting to look at some of that historical violence. Coming to a close here. Here are the advisors. I'm Alex Dent. As I said, I'm the first year master's program advisor. Steve Lubkman is the second year master's program advisor. Steve does a lot of the clearances for second year students and kind of working with second year students. The Master of Science program, which is really kind of a separate deal over in hominid paleobiology, is directed by Dave Braun. It's a master's in science program, as I say. He's there. And here's general contact information for the department, the general email, our number, and then a broad link. So I just threw out a ton of information very quickly. It was like a 25-minute barrage. But let me come out of my